Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. I was asked to say a few words, and they will be very few, to mark the first event of Turn the Tide. And I'm honored to kick off this truly significant event. Those who came up with the idea for Turn the Tide decided to call it a conversation. And I think that's an excellent way to characterize what I hope will be a very positive experience for our university. A conversation is an informal talk where thoughts and information and ideas and sentiments are exchanged. And I like the idea that it's informal because it implies that it's meant to be friendly. Friends have conversations. That doesn't mean, of course, that even in a friendly conversation, everyone will agree with one another on every point. But in order for it to remain a conversation, those involved begin from a posture of mutual respect. They come prepared to listen as much as to be heard, and even in disagreement, they're civil in their exchanges. And finally, they approach the experience with a spirit of goodwill, seeking, if not to agree, at least to understand one another. For me, a conversation is the antithesis of what we often see on cable news shows, where panelists often shout each other down in front of partisan audiences whose members keep score of all the put-downs. That's obviously not the goal of Turn the Tide. And with that in mind, I'd like to suggest a theme that I hope will be a good way to start the conversation. And I'd like you to think of the word one, O-N-E, in capital letters. And when I talk about one, first of all, we begin with one thing in common, and that is the success of our students. That is the one thing that we all agree on, or we wouldn't be here. In order to help our students achieve success, we must be united in our intent and in our goals. In other words, we need to be one in purpose. To be one, we need the best efforts of all of us together, the best we all can give. And the research literature supports conclusions that organizations that foster including everyone experience higher levels of employee satisfaction, a greater degree of emotional investment and effort. When we all feel part of the whole, we're more likely to act as one. Ensuring that every member of an organization feels valued and important and included only happens when the members share a mutual understanding and appreciation of the individual talents, personal knowledge, acquired skills, life experience, cultural backgrounds, and personalities of the other. Helping students become critical thinkers is an Ashford institutional learning outcome. Becoming one means that we're going to have to use the skills that we teach our students. That means we're opening to questioning the assumptions on which our values and attitudes and beliefs are based. These wonderful people on this panel represent themselves, not the university, and I know they will do so beautifully. I wanted you to know that some of the questions that were submitted really needed to be directed to me and to our executive team, and they're outside what the Turn the Tide panel is really intended to accomplish. So I'll take those on and deal with them in town meetings and in other venues. Welcome, thank you for being here, and now I'm really pleased to turn the time over to our moderator, Amor Castro. Amor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Swenson. I am excited today to kick off Turn the Tide. Once again, Dr. Swenson, that was a beautiful message in regards to how we can work together as one here at the university for the sake of our students. As we begin to kick off this Turn the Tide series, we are gathered here today with an incredible group of panelists, and I'm excited for you guys to get to know each and every one of them. They will be addressing some of the questions that were submitted prior. So anyone who did submit a question, we thank you and we cannot wait to start the conversation. Before I introduce them, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Amor Castro, and here at Ashford University, I'm the Associate Director of Talent Acquisition and Development. And my passion is people, people and conversation. So again, coming here today, having this conversation gets me extremely excited. But before I get too excited, I'd really like to address some of the social unrest that is happening in today's nation. And it is important that we're able to talk about these type of issues in a safe place where we can engage in open dialogue in hopes to create a space where it's okay to talk and ask questions and inquire and seek knowledge about stuff that is happening in the world. So here, Turn the Tides is that space at the university where we can have those conversations and begin that dialogue. Once again, I'm here today because I think it's important that we work towards a place that we all feel supported, equal, and that we are in an environment that enriches our differences versus highlighting the divide. Recent events in the country have directly impacted me and my family, and I'm sure there are other employees, staff, and students that may have feel the same. So my hopes is that our Turn the Tide series will lead the charge towards a university that celebrates diversity, inclusion, and equality. I hope that today this conversation will lead us to be a better university overall, and that we will be a better community, and that we will connect and communicate as one. So as we get uncomfortable and start talking about the different questions that were submitted, let's make sure that we keep the same thing in mind. Let's work together as one. Let's come together as one. And let's always remember that our students are what make us go. That's why we're here today, is to support our very, very special group of students that come to our university. Before we get into the questions, I like to consider and just kind of take a moment to talk about some populations that have been identified in the recent events that are happening. So I'm going to throw up a PowerPoint really quick for you guys to view. Here we go. And as we look at these questions, I want you to take a moment and just think to yourself, where do you lie? Where do you see yourself? What are you aligned with, okay? So, see, here we go. I'm getting an error message and sharing my screen, just saying that you have to disable so I can share with participants. As we get that set up, basically the questions that we're going to ask, and we're going to do a poll as well. The questions that we're proposing, there's 4 questions. So as Dr. Miller and Yvonne go ahead and propose the 4 questions, we will then look at, see, I think it's working now. There we go. Okay, we have our questions. So they will propose the 4 questions. After we look at the 4 questions, you will then have an opportunity just to take 2 to 3 minutes to think to yourself, where do you align? Where do you feel that you are aligned with kind of the situations that are happening? So just take a moment. We'll have Dr. Miller and Yvonne go through the questions, and then you will be able to submit in your poll and answers to us right after. So, Dr. Miller? Dr. Miller, we can't.
I think I was muted. I think you can hear me now, all right?
Yes.
All right, I got a head shake. Can you hear me now? You know the commercial. So we did some real quick research, and again, this is not exhaustive research, but just kind of research with some of the I'm going to say present speakers that we've been hearing in the. If your inbox is anything like mine, you've been getting hundreds of invites to different forums and panel discussions similar to this one. So I kind of pulled together kind of what I heard many of them saying, about 10 or 15 of them, and we found that there are about 4 common buckets in which we as Americans align when it goes to how we view, I'm going to say, how we relate with one another, injustices and things of that sort, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the first, I'm going to use them buckets, and hopefully I'm not offending anyone by calling them buckets, but that makes sense in my mind. Category or buckets are those that are directly impacted. So people who are directly impacted are those that kind of live with that injustice. They experience exclusion and equity, on a regular basis. It's kind of like a way of life, a reality. So those folks that are directly impacted, they make all their decisions based on the injustice, the inequity that they've perceived and experienced, throughout their lifetime from birth. Then you have the second category. We're going to call those that are aware. So very aware that there's social injustice and differences and imbalance and inequity and all those kind of things that go on, but they've basically been unaffected by it. So because they've been unaffected or removed from it, for whatever reason that may be, they're less concerned with it, and therefore they're not really engaged with trying to get behind the inequity or combat the inequity. They're just kind of neutral, pulled back, and have anything to do with it. The third bucket or category that we found was those that were unaffected. So the unaffected category, so they arrange in this awareness. They've seen some things, maybe experienced some things, so they're aware that there's some differences. They're aware of some inequity, right? But they're basically indifferent about it. And they're indifferent because, like, let me say it like this: their ethics and their morals oppose any injustice, don't think that it's right, so they're against it. But they're indifferent and they lie dormant in speaking against it or speaking for it because they haven't experienced anything that's really moved them. So that unaffected category knows it's there, but doesn't say anything, just lets it lie still because, it's easier to do that because it hasn't moved them. We have that fourth category, which we call non-believers. So the non-believers are those who, for whatever reason it may be, believe what our Constitution and different things say, that, all men are created equal. And it's racism and inequity. They're not really a reality per se, because the way that our system is set up, everyone is on level ground. So those are the four basic buckets that we have: directly impacted, aware, unaffected, and non-believers.
Perfect. So we will now put up the poll based on those four buckets. As you read these questions, where do you align? Just ask yourself. So we'll let the poll go up. If you guys can submit your answers, that would be great. This is a live poll. As they come in, we'll see questions coming in, and just kind of trying to understand the atmosphere here at Ashford. All of the answers coming in are anonymous, so please feel free to let us know where you're at. So we'll let that go for another minute or so. Great. It looks like more than half of us have responded already. Yes. Yes. As we continue to get the votes, something to consider is that, awareness starts with the conversation. So coming here today and just being able to talk about it really is going to help understand where you aligned and help you just bring more awareness to your life. So thank you so much for all the participants who are responding. We're going to go ahead and close the poll. So you have about 5 seconds to get your votes in, and then we will display the results that we received so far. Okay. Perfect. So here is our results to our question. So it looks like most people are aware. 24% were directly impacted. So thank you. Thank you so much for just sharing that. And as we continue this conversation, we will go ahead and see if you still feel the same at the very end, if your opinion and what bucket you sit in is the same after having the combo. Okay. Now, with further ado, I'm so excited to introduce all of our panelists today that will be talking about all the questions that were submitted. So we have Flora. Flora is a student here at Ashford University, born in Central South Africa Republic. She moved to the States in 2001. She currently is a enterprise risk management consultant at Blue Shield of California. And she is going to Ashford, currently working on her master's in business administration at the Forbes School of Business and Technology. She's in her third course of the program and is shocked on how quickly it's actually moving. As you know, our programs move very, very fast here at Ashford. Flora's here today because solidarity is important to her, and she wants to ensure that human race can move forward and truly create a world where everyone's equal, respected, and cared for. Thank you so much, Flora, for joining us on our panel. We are excited that you are here. Next, we have Megan. Megan Guzman is our employee relations leader here at Ashford University. She graduated from California Western School of Law, where she focused on child advocacy and employment law. She is a volunteer when she's not at work, and she volunteers for the Shelter of Soldiers, a nonprofit organization which trains service animals on how to be service animals to help combat vets that deal with PTS. She is here today because she believes that it is time for the Ashford community to come together and work as one. Thank you, Megan, for being on our panel as well. Next, we have Yvonne Dr. Loronzo. Thank you so much for being here today. She is our department chair and professor of health science program here at Ashford. She has been in teaching for over 15 years in higher education, and 7 of those 15 years have been here at the Ashford community, making impact on students' lives. Yvonne really believes that one is possible and can change everything as long as we come together. Her personal connection with the topic is that she has had a long life desire to experience life without discrimination. So to sum it up, a quote that she is quoting from Mr. Rogers: "As human beings, our job in life is to help people realize how rare and valuable each of us really are. That each of us has something unique unique at all times, and it is our job to encourage others to discover the uniqueness and provide ways of developing its expression." So thank you so much. Last but certainly not least, Dr. Miller is here today to talk about the conversation and just start the conversation. He has been in the education arena as a teacher and administrator for K-12 through university levels. Has done a lot of research in his time in regards to focusing on just really achieving student achievement. He is an author of the book called Why Some Seeds Don't Grow, a book that sheds lights on high impact principles needed to enhance education, mentoring, and partnering of urban youth. Dr. Miller is an educator and believes that we are meant to facilitate by thinking and changing the world. Thus, his mantra is education, motivation, help them grow. He's here today to share personal connection to the topic, because as a Black male growing up in a economical distressed urban area, he has gained a bank of wisdom and valuable insight in power of education and power of allyism when educating marginalized populations. So this is our panel, and I want to welcome each and every one of you. Thank you so much for being here today. And as we jump in, we have a quick video that we'd like to share with you before we get into the question. So one moment.
Each day we have a chance to connect with other people, and when we do, we assign an identity to each person we meet. We put people in groups that help us define the world around us, or the world we think is around us. Some groups are helpful to us. Others we think deserve respect. Some we deem average. Some are to be avoided. Some are wise, inexperienced. There are those we idolize, and those we ignore. Groups that separate us from them.
Today I'm going to ask you some general questions. They may seem funny, random, serious, or deeply personal. Please be brave. Answer honestly. Who in this room is the life of the party? Who is adopted?
But what happens when we make connections and groups begin to dissolve? There are those who believe in life after death. Those who are immigrants. Those who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. The lonely. Those who love fast food. Those who love science fiction movies. Those who have been bullied. And we who have bullied others. The lucky ones who are madly in love. Those who have lost a child. Those who have overcome addiction. And those who acknowledge the courage of others. Those who have found peace. And others who have saved lives. And then there's everyone who experiences this together. Maybe there's more that connects us than we think. Because in the end, there is only us.
Thank you. So let's jump into our questions today. And we will do that now. So our first question that came from our panel, that we'd like to address. Question number 1. We had a lot of questions. So if your question didn't get answered, as Dr. Swenson mentioned, there are some questions that were meant mostly directed towards him and the executive team. So he will answer those at a different time. We do have other questions that we feel that are appropriate to answer here with Turn the Tide. So the first question we have today, this one's directed to you, Dr. Miller. How do we show allyship? How do allies show allyship when it's related to solidarity and working as one?
Well, I think that's a great question and very pertinent to this whole pandemic, the pandemonium situation we have going on in our world today here in America. So allyism is it's not a new word, but you haven't heard it much until recently, where a whole category of folks have been awakened by some of the issues that we've been seeing through social media, like hence say George Floyd and some of those things that have just sparked some things inside of people's minds. So I believe that there's 3 A's that we should consider, 3 A's of allyism. And that first A is to acknowledge. So meaning this, so as a black male, I was born in 1965, so I'm 54 years old, and I was right at the tail end of that whole civil rights movement. So I've seen some transitions in society and the norms of our society throughout my life. And for much of my life, many people would always say, you're pulling the black card, so as to say, well, that really doesn't exist. You're making more of it than it is. Whenever I sense some type of, I'm going to say diversity or inequity, in my experiences or in my walk, throughout my life. And so for many years, I kind of grew up thinking that, no one believes me. No one believes that this is taking place. Look, this has just happened. And it kind of creates this self-consciousness or this self-esteem issue with yourself, right? So when someone from another race, especially my Anglo sisters and brothers from the majority population, acknowledge that I might have sensed some inequity or you know, some just injustice, it does a great deal for me. Someone believes me, and I feel much better. It's like a weight off my shoulder. So that's the first A. The second A is advocacy. There's if you don't mind me using a religious piece of literature, there's an old story where there was, it's called the parable of the Good Samaritan, where this Good Samaritan is coming along and he sees this guy on the street who's been beaten and robbed. Now that guy on the street has been beaten and robbed. He's from a whole different race, a whole different ethnicity, and those two races and ethnicities didn't talk. Like there was tension between them. But that Good Samaritan stopped, and he took that hurt person to the nearest inn, and he spoke for that person. He said to the inn owner, this guy needs help. So he spoke for him. So that advocacy that majority populations can do for minorities such as myself or any other subgroup of diversity that exists, whether it's, you know, sexual orientation, race, religion, gender, age, whatever the case may be, ability, speak for them. Speak up on their behalf. I get what they're saying. I understand. Or even if you don't get or understand, you know, speaking and having some words about it, that advocacy goes a long way in allyism. And the third A is action. So that action, to use that same parable, when that gentleman took that hurt person to that inn and he advocated for that person, said he needs some help. He then gave him his resources. He said, whatever he needs, put it on my bill and I'll come back and pay for it later. Now, I'm not saying, don't turn me off. I'm not saying you need to give someone money. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is give resources and platforms. For instance, this Turn the Tides conversation is an example of advocacy, action. It's giving a platform to have a discussion about something that would not have been discussed. It's putting the resources in place, giving people time during a work day to talk about a thing like this. So those three A's, and I could talk on forever, but I'm sure you get the point. We're intelligent folks, and you can expand those from there, those examples from there. But the three A's are acknowledge, advocacy, and action. That's how we create allyism in America today between whatever subgroup it is that we want to make that exist.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. That was a great answer. Just to kind of piggyback off that, Yvonne, how about doing this in the classroom? How do you feel that you can create allyship in the classroom when we're working with our students as well?
Well, you know, I think probably a lot of people have thought about this, and especially anyone who's been an academic for any period of time. When you start developing curriculum, you want to, somewhere in your mind that you want to be inclusive, that you want the diversity to exist, and not only in the curriculum, but as you're responding to students and trying to engage with them. And I think that when you start to consider curriculum, it's important to determine how you're going to connect. You hear that a lot at Ashford when we talk about connecting with students. How can we connect with them? How can we become a part of their lives? How can we let them know that we are there and that we are there for them? And I think that's a part of it. We would like, in a realistic world, we would like to think that this is not something that we should have to think about, to force ourselves to think about, even though the topic comes up a lot. And I think it starts with something from the very beginning as institutional learning outcomes. You're welcome, Tricia. It starts with institutional learning outcomes and works its way into the program learning outcomes, works its way into the course learning outcomes. And the only way that we're going to be able to engage students, and there's a lot of wonderful work a lot of faculty and have done in working to try to engage students that exist out there. But unless we have a desire within ourselves to be able to make that connection, the students have to have a sense of familiarity when they go into the classroom. A case study, a discussion, an assignment has to sound familiar to them. not something that belongs to someone else's life. While they are used to that, students get used to it. They get used to the fact that this is about someone else's life. So they may not even question it. It may not even be their expectations. But when they see something that sounds familiar in any way, no matter what it's related to, that helps them to connect to the classroom, and it helps them connect to the professor. And if it's not in the assignment, the instructor, should do everything they can to try to make that connection real for them, to try to help them understand that. Once we get to the point where we feel as if this is too hard or we can't figure out how to do it, we're not going to be able to do this and to be successful at it unless we have the buy-in from the student as well. We need to hear from them. What are they looking for? What kind of things are they looking for in the classroom? And seek out, their opinions, their thoughts, what they'd like to see, what makes them feel better. And when you think about diverse groups, when you think about what their experiences have been and how they're individual, just like that film showed at the very beginning, some things there are going to be some commonalities. There's going to be commonalities in being a single parent. There's going to be commonalities of of neighborhoods that maybe people grew up in, or states that they grew up in. Those commonalities are going to exist. But where you're going to make that direct connection and that touch is to bring something that they didn't think anyone was ever going to be willing to discuss, or anyone was ever going to be willing to report. And that's just, to keep it brief, that's how I would introduce that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your insight. That kind of leads me to my next question that I want to direct to you, Flora, as a student, right? Is it important or valuable to prioritize safe spaces and affiliate groups for students of color? Do you think this is important? Is this something that students need?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I 100% believe that this is very, very important. I believe that affinity groups create a community for people, and I'm sure, as a lot of us on this call can attest to, community is extremely important because it lets us feel and know that we belong somewhere, especially now when there's like the Black Lives Matter movement is happening. There are so many people in this world who have felt as though they don't have a safe space to go, which is why, now I'm so happy that people are speaking out about this, because I think for all of us as human beings, even starting off with our family, like that is our affinity group, if you will, when we first were born. It's our safe space. Our parents create a place for us to go and speak our minds, and our parents understand us and they know what's happening with us because they look like us, they have the same experiences as us. And just to share a personal story, I went to a private Catholic high school, and I could literally count on both hands how many people of color went to the school. And even now, like, they don't have an affinity group, which is something that a lot of alumni, including myself, are working to create, and we want the school to put together. And the one moment where I realized the actual importance of affinity groups was in college, because I joined the Black Student Union. And it was there where I really felt like, oh my gosh, I belong somewhere. People look like me, they understand me, and they're here to really lift me up when, there's so many things in the world that tell you that, no, like, you don't belong, like, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be in these spaces. And like, I felt like the affinity group that I belonged to in college really helped me realize, wait, I do belong. And I am going to speak up, and I am going to make sure that my community around me also is lifted up as I'm lifted up in not only my school, but my career, the things that I read, the things that I talk about. And so I definitely feel like affinity groups help not only bring confidence to people, but it helps people feel like, okay, one, I belong, two, my voice is important. And it's important because everyone else around me also says my voice is important. When if I'm in a predominantly Caucasian space, my experience is very different than Megan's experience, for example. And so for people to come together and really understand each other and empathize with each other is, I think, so important to have.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And that kind of goes back to the questions that I have. How do you create these spaces online? How do we create this in the classroom? So if Dr. Miller or Yvonne wants to kind of respond to that. How do we create these safe spaces in the classroom for our students?
Well, I don't see Yvonne clicking her button, so I guess she diverted that one to me.
Gentlemen.
Well, I mean, there's several ways. There's several ways. Many of us, because we've been here, 8, 9, 10 years, some of us are experts at kind of creating a safe space, or if you will, I'm going to say that family. So I don't know if I did a talk not too long ago, and I talked about 4 keys of and 3 pillars of creating culturally responsive systems, whatever the system may be. And one of those is equitable access, and another one is to kind of celebrate or accept differences or things that are indigenous to different diverse groups, and embedding those differences into the daily operations, into the culture of whatever it is that you're building, whether it's your classroom, your office space, or whatever the case may be. But I think it's very important that we create learning partnerships. So as far as safe spaces are concerned, and I'm kind of getting ahead of another question that I'm being asked to answer, but I'm going to say it twice because I think it's good enough to say twice. I think creating those learning partnerships is so important, meaning I need to be able to come, I'm going to just talk plain because you guys know me. I'm just going to come off my high horse, step down off my platform of being the professor or whatever it is that I am, and I am going to look that student eye to eye, virtually, online, and say, hey, I just don't know this. Tell me about, A, B, C. Explain to me why such and such, because I really just don't know and I want to know. And then I have to be open to whatever response I get, and then be willing to make some kind of adjustments and changes so that student sees that I was, authentic in my questioning, and then I was ready to act on it. So I think that's a super pattern, given a principle and not talking about specific strategies or techniques that you can do. I think that principle will fit with all of our styles.
Perfect, thank you. And that leads us into our next question. Great insight, and I think you came up with another A to your 3 A's. You might have a 4th A, but we'll get back to that in a second. Let's lead into our next question. This is for you, Megan. Piggyback off what they just said and what we're talking about. When we are using the word unity, I think of the words such as solidarity, community, and safe spaces. How do you create a sense of unity, solidarity, and community amongst each other in order to lead by example for our students?
Sure. I mean, I think in a way, the answer to every question we've had so far is an answer to this question partially, right? So, we are all part of a lot of communities, and the Ashford community is one of them, but we know that the memberships in those other communities also kind of impact how we view the world, what our lens is, right? And so it's important to remember that it's best to first seek to understand and not to be understood. And that's part of how you start to build a community. It takes time and it takes trust, but to understand where the other person is coming from is the first step in building that time and that trust relationship. And also, for me, a big thing is that listening is an action. It's not just something that is passive. You listen and that helps you understand, right? And you don't necessarily need to be understood. As Flora mentioned, affinity groups are a great way. I think faculty and staff can participate in those. I know recently in one of our town halls, the Latinx group was mentioned and promoted. If you are a member of that community, I would suggest interacting with students there, interacting with your colleagues. And then one for me that, it's real, it's true, is admitting and acknowledging your mistakes, because we're gonna make them. So admitting that and acknowledging them with a real apology and actually working to make the change is, I think, something that is really impactful. To give an example from my own life that happened just yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. I referenced that someone identified as something rather than that they were this, and that person called me out, rightfully so, and said, hey, you know what? saying it that way hurts me because it doesn't recognize who I really am. Now, there's a few ways I could have taken that, but I think for all of us to remember in building this community and acting in civil, like having civil discourse over it, the real apology there is, I am sorry that I hurt you. That's it. Nothing else. And then I will do better and make the change to my language in the future. And that's all that I can work on, right? So I think the more you do things like that, and the more that we all do things like that, whether it's with students or colleagues or whomever, I think that will really help to go build that unity and community as an Ashford community and as other parts of the communities that we're in.
And just to piggyback off of what Megan said, I also had an experience with an Ashford faculty member, a professor of mine, where because I expressed how the Black Lives Matter movement was affecting me, and I didn't want to show up to a space not whole, which is why affinity groups, again, are very important. They allow everyone to show up as themselves versus what society expects you to show up as. And her response to my expression of opinion was that, you know, all lives matter, which I was like, this is absolutely the incorrect and inappropriate response to have. And what I requested, and I had a conversation with Dr. Swenson, who also amazing man, by the way. You know, I just asked for her to apologize. So Megan, like, you apologizing to that individual is 100% the appropriate path to take, because an apology can go such a long way, and it actually opens the door to have more fruitful conversations with each other so that we can better acknowledge each other, affirm each other, and advocate for each other, and also take action for each other.
Absolutely.
Using all the A's that, you know, Dr. Miller had.
Absolutely. And Flora, sharing your story and your experience, it is true. We aren't perfect. No one's perfect. You know, staff, faculty, all of us have experiences, and sometimes we just don't know. And so having these type of conversations, bringing awareness so people know, back to the polling, how you don't know what bucket you fall in. So you don't know how your words will affect a student, a colleague, or anyone, right? So sometimes you don't know. So the more we continue to build this community and communicate and create allyship and talk and have dialogue and be uncomfortable, the better we will become better as one, right? Back to Craig's theme. Together as one will help our students better. So I'm sure that whatever experience you had or any students having, we will be better every day we continue to have the conversation and work together to come together as one and build that community of solidarity and feeling that we are connected. So thank you for sharing. Yvonne, did you have any thoughts on that as well? I just didn't know if you were going to tap in.
Yeah, something just struck me when we were talking about safe places a minute ago and listening to Flora and Megan. I think it's also important to think about, when you think about a safe place, and you have to really think about what that means. And when you think about it in an academic setting, obviously you want to be free of bias and criticism or any threatening actions or any particular ideas or conversations. So when you think about it that way, groups that are people of color, the LGBTQ community, and a lot of gender issues too in those conversations of being safe. Some individuals come with so much struggle and fight to protect themselves in social injustices. They protect themselves within their own families. They have this kind of wall up to protect themselves because they're used to, unfortunately, the reality for some or most is that they're used to being bullied or they're used to being made fun of or even ridiculed or even seen as second, third, fourth, and fifth class citizens. There's so many groups that can fall in those categories. So when someone comes to the classroom, and we're facing this with one another right now, that kind of defensiveness can be seen a lot of times in the classroom, because it can be seen, or even in this organization, people feel defensive. You know, what do I have to do to let you guys know that I love everybody? What do I have to do? What are you asking me to do? I don't say anything. I don't do anything wrong. I'm always very kind to everybody. What else do I need to do? There's always more to do. You have to decide what that is for yourself. And for the student, when the student comes back and seems angry or frustrated, you have to ask yourself, what can I do differently? What could I have done differently? Is this just about me, or is it about more than that? And that's a conversation that we've had to have. I wanted just to mention.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I couldn't agree more with all of your thoughts. I think it's very important, again, that we create this community where we all can come together and just really, do better every day. If we march towards that direction, I think it really is going to help. And that starts with the allyship. That starts with just having the conversation. That starts with asking before assuming. So if you don't know how to, and this kind of came through on the questions, like if you don't know how to address a topic or how to identify or how to call something, like if it's African American versus Black, if you don't know, all you have to do is ask and start that dialogue with that person and ask them, what are you comfortable with? How should I say this? Versus not knowing and saying the wrong thing. So like I said, we can all work together to do better every day, to create a better community for each other, for our students, and for our families outside of work as well. So my next question is actually for you, Yvonne. In regards, and we're talking about community, so it's really important that you kind of mentioned this. When we say community, it's not just about race. It's about gender, disabilities, all of those. When we say community, we're talking about everyone who embodies our population at Ashford as our students, faculty, and staff. So it's important that this question that did come across it, and I think it's really important to ask you, Yvonne, how do we best support our LGBTQ community students in our classroom? It's a question that came across. Really looking for how do you support that subgroup as well?
When we shared this question, and I've been thinking about I've been thinking a lot about how I would want to answer it, and it's hard to put that all down in words because I would need a lot of time to do that. And as a gay woman myself, and as a Hispanic gay woman myself, and the experiences I've had throughout my life, I was thinking a personal story of when I first started teaching at a university. And I was in the closet. Everybody knows what that means. I was in the closet, way deep in the closet, back in the closet where the closet doesn't exist, I guess. And some students came up to me after class. I was teaching an Introduction to Sociology course, and they came up to me and they said, listen, we were wondering if you would be our faculty advisor for our LGBTQ group. And I was like, why would you want me to do that? And it's because they felt a connection to me that was even a connection that I had not made clear, that I had not been open to, but they felt connected to me because I was just connected to all the students in the classroom. And I can't explain to you what it feels like to be invisible in life, to others, and then to have to experience that to be invisible in the classroom, to come to the classroom and be invisible too. As whether you're a person of color, if you're a woman, if you're gay, whatever the situation might be, because it's a way to be invisible is a form of exclusion. So if you don't feel that you can make that connection in the classroom with your professor, or if you don't feel like you can make it with other students, or you don't feel like the university even acknowledges the fact that you are who you are, then you're still going to live as an invisible person. And to live as an invisible person, the classroom is the place where you can start to feel visible to the rest of society and to not be fearful of it and to feel safe with it. Our lifestyles are all diverse. Everybody has different opinions about, there's a lot of issues that have been going on for a very long time with the LGBT community, for as long as I can remember, in the 35 years that I've been alive. And I'm just kidding, 35 years, but I had to throw a little joke in there. Why everybody's laughing? So some struggles are very personal for individuals. Someone knows someone else who has been through those struggles, and to see it and come to reality for someone in a classroom, such as in a case study, like I said, or in the discussion question, or to even acknowledge someone's in a relationship with someone. I just remember times at work where I didn't even mention my partner's name. It was as if she didn't exist. That's not obviously never been my case at Ashford, but I think of those small little things that were my personal experiences and how painful they were and how long that I lived with them. And I think about those very same things with anyone who comes from populations or their own experiences that have made them feel in any form or fashion as if they were second-class citizens. I don't want our students to be second-class citizens in the classroom. I don't want them to be second-class citizens at Ashford. I don't want anyone who remotely walks in or physically walks into Ashford University to feel that sense of being invisible. And so it's got to start somewhere.
Yeah, it starts with us. Thank you, Yvonne. It starts with us and coming together as one again to create that community, to work together as one, to just be better every day when we come to work, when we work with our students, when we work with each other, and just really remember to love one another, right? So thank you, Yvonne. As we go into our last question, because of time, I will direct my last question to Dr. Miller, and then we will kind of go over what will happen after this Turn the Tide. We will continue to have conversations here at the university. So let's jump into our last question. Dr. Miller, can you please expand and provide more insights on ways we can continue to check our biases and engage in real conversations about different ways to help our students in regards to the impact that the current political climate has? And I mean, not just students, let's say colleagues and faculty or staff as well. So what is your suggestion in how we can check our biases and engage in conversation?
Well, the short answer is this. So we've all been conditioned. Everyone's been conditioned from the time we were born, kind of what Megan alluded to. Was it Megan or was it Flora? Our parents have basically conditioned us, trained us. It's just our environments. We're somewhat a product of our environment. So our brains have two basic functions. They remember and they imagine. So it stores memories and then it imagines what we could possibly do. So whenever a stimulus comes our way, our brain immediately goes to our memory, to one of those categories. What happened in the past? And then it decides, what am I going to do right now for this stimulus based on what happened in the past? And if we have only been conditioned or seen or been exposed to a certain type of response or memory or confined somehow, then that's going to be how we act. And the deal is this: it's not good or bad. It's just who we are. It's an implicit bias that we don't even know about because I've been conditioned that way. Doesn't make me a bad person, just makes me a person. So to answer your question, again, the talk I had a couple of weeks ago, the first key that I gave was awareness. It's a very powerful key. So in that awareness, what we have to realize is, okay, if you are experiencing situations or circumstances or some type of stimulus and you're responding or reacting the same way and you keep getting the same signals back, and those signals might be, some pushback or, something that's a little controversial, then that right there should be a key to you that your actions, your responses may need to be evaluated. So if you keep seeing the same thing, you're probably needing to be aware of your response. So how do I become aware of my bias? I'm just kind of repeating what I said. If I keep finding myself in the same circumstance, the same situation, then first place I need to check is within myself. And kind of probably what you're doing is just acting on what you know. So what do you do at this point? At that point, you simply ask a question. You simply ask and say, hey, every time this situation comes up, I respond or react this way because this is the way I see it. But this is the response I get, and it's not what I was looking for. So you simply ask someone and say, why is that? And you sit back, but you ask not to answer. You ask not to give a response. You ask, what's the two words we use? Is it active listening and intentional listening? Those we learned in all of our professional developments. So you ask that question that way so that you can get enough information so you can go back to your closet and honestly evaluate yourself and say, okay, what can I do differently? Why? It's just, so you got to do that honest, open, willing work So HOW, how, honest, this is what's happening. It's not working the way I want it to work. Now I got to get open to the new information that you just got when you asked the question. Now the third step is for you to be willing to do something differently. So the process is being aware, kind of opening yourself and being vulnerable enough to ask a question to someone. And it's usually someone to whom you're getting that kind of response from. Someone that understands that side of the fence or that perspective, and then you being open and willing enough to say, okay, what can I do different, and actually doing those things different and practicing them. But be aware that when you ask those questions and you make yourself vulnerable, you have to be willing to receive the answer that you're going to be given, because it's all about growth. And sometimes growth doesn't always feel the best at first, but once it occurs, man, how much more powerful are we to each other? And we get to do that one thing. It's our new evolution.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'd like to take the time to thank everyone who's on the panel today. As we have started and opened the space, first, thank you, Dr. Swenson, for allowing us to have this space here to begin to turn the tide and have these conversations. Next, I want to thank our panelists for your insights, sharing your personal experience and connection to this topic. As we continue to do our series, this is our first of 5. We invite you to, one, complete a survey that will be released very shortly after this. Give us feedback, let us know your thoughts, let us know what you'd like to hear about, talk about, and let us know how we're doing. So once again, to work as one, we need feedback. We need to definitely make sure that we understand what you want to have conversations about. Next, we will have small group conversations. These groups are going to be smaller. If you'd like to continue just to jump in dialogue or just become more aware or just have conversation, I invite you again to join our small dialogue that will happen over the next 3 weeks. There will be facilitated in small groups between 10 to 20 people, and you will have time to respond and speak and talk and share your personal stories too. So once again, thank you everyone for joining Turn the Tide today. We are excited that you came to be here with us, and we cannot wait to see you next time at the next Turn the Tide. Have a wonderful day, and thank you so much.